A large portion of the Jewish nation has returned to its homeland, but the heart, soul, and mind of much of the Jewish nation are still in exile mode. This state of affairs must and will inevitably change. This is Torah Nation TV from Jerusalem, and we are speaking with the head of Machon Shilo, Rabbi David Bar-Hayim. Shalom, Rabbi Bar-Hayim.
Shalom.
Is the rabbi associated with the body known as the Sanhedrin?
The simple and short answer to that question is no. But I would not be doing my duty, I think, if I left it at that. So I should explain the history of that body and my connection or lack of connection with it, and I will try to do so briefly. Going back as long as 15 or so years ago, there were certain discussions, certain groups of rabbis and interested parties got together on different occasions, and I participated in some of these discussions. Discussions which centered on the issue of re-establishing the semicha, and that is to say the proper, authentic rabbinical ordination, and the Sanhedrin, Beit Din HaGadol. As I say, I took part in some of these discussions, not all of them, and I was very disappointed with the direction, with the tenor of these discussions, more particularly by what was not discussed, or the unwillingness to discuss what I consider to be the real issues and lay out some kind of plan, some kind of blueprint, and some kind of vision for such a body if it were in fact to come about. About 11 and a half years ago, this was in the beginning of Tafshin Samech He, October 2004, there was an initial founding meeting of people, rabbis associated with this body called the Sanhedrin. I was invited to attend, and I deliberately did not do so because I had reached the conclusion sometime prior to that in fact nothing could possibly come of this gathering of people and what they were planning to do, because I had discussed these things with them, as I said, and I knew that they did not have any vision at all, and in fact I was convinced they had no idea as to what a Sanhedrin should be dealing with and how it should go about dealing with these things, what the purpose of such a institution is and should be in the present and in the future. And seeing that I was convinced that none of these things were understood correctly, and therefore nothing would come of all of this, I chose to stay away.
What happened after the founding of this body? Did you have any dealings with this body after that time?
For a number of years, I really had no association with it at all. I attended no meetings. However, about 5 or 6 years later, after the initial gathering in Tiberia, I was asked particularly to attend a certain meeting, not so much as a participant, which I indicated to them I was not interested in doing, but as an interpreter. They wished to speak to a certain individual who does not speak Hebrew, and they asked me to come along as an interpreter to simply facilitate the conversation, the discussion with this person. And to this I agreed, and I went along on that occasion. And at the end of that meeting, I was approached by some of the people there, and they asked me, and in fact implored that I begin to attend the meetings on a regular basis. And despite the fact that I did not feel in my heart that there was any hope that anything would come of this, nevertheless, I said to myself, this is something that you must give it a chance at least. You must be able to say that you tried, and it's worth devoting some time to give it every possible chance to amount to something. What I discovered, unfortunately, was that not only was there no vision and no blueprint, and no plan of action. Even the meetings themselves were a total shambles. There was no agenda, there was no clear way of raising issues or rejecting other issues from the agenda, and therefore nothing productive was able to be achieved in these meetings, which I attend on a regular basis for a number of months every week. And then I and another person attempted to at least lay down some ground rules for effective and reasonable discussion and the setting of the agenda, etc., of these meetings. And we devoted quite some time to laying out some rules and regulations as to how issues could be raised and proposed, and what would be discussed at any given meeting. And all this was accepted by unanimous vote. But even then, I discovered that certain individuals had obviously felt that this was just a game in order to appease certain people, the acceptance of these rules. And in fact, these people did not intend to allow such rules and regulations for debate and discussion and setting the agenda to exist in reality. And when I saw this was the case, I ceased attending those meetings. This was approximately 7 years ago or something like that. And therefore, since that time, I have had no association with that body. But the main thing to understand here is that any such discussion of the Sanhedrin, of reintroducing the smicha, has to be based on a broad and profound vision of what is missing, what is wrong, what is lacking in the Jewish world and the Torah world, and it has to be based on a willingness and understanding and a capacity to suggest how to go about changing things entirely based on the Torah shebichtav and the Torah shebe'al peh, but not simply suggesting more of the same. We have to understand that we must deal with many issues, and we must break new ground. And people who are unwilling to break new ground, people who do not have the capacity to do so or are afraid of doing so, can simply not lead such an endeavor.
Is there an halachically feasible way to reestablish a Sanhedrin?
The simple answer to that is most definitely yes, there is a way, because there has to be a way. In other words, how could there not be a way, according to the Torah, to reinstitute and reestablish the body, the central and authoritative body for teaching and interpreting and disseminating the Torah within the Jewish people. This is an essential institution of the Jewish people. It is absolutely crucial that the Jewish people have such a body, and of course, therefore, it follows that there has to be a way, according to the Torah, to reinstitute such a thing, without, of course, relying on supernatural events and fairy tale ideas and notions. And there is such a way, as laid out by Rambam 850 years ago. What the Rambam suggests is as follows. All the Talmidei Chachamim, all the Torah scholars in Eretz Yisrael, in the land of Israel, have to be gathered together, and they have to agree, either all of them unanimously or a majority of them have to agree that one of their number be appointed and given the title of Rosh HaYeshiva, the head of the yeshiva, the head of the academy, that is to say, the head of all the Chachamim in Eretz Yisrael, and he, by being so defined and being accepted in this fashion by his peers, he becomes the first samuch, the first ordained Chacham. And from that point onwards, he, together with his colleagues, are able to go on ordaining others, and in this fashion, the smicha is reestablished. This is how it can be done, and this is how it must be done, and there is no other way. Any other suggestion relies on fairy tale notions and supernatural and irrational ideas and suggestions which have no basis in the Torah, and we are not allowed to base our dealings with Torah and with this very central mitzvah in the Torah of appointing Batei Din and appointing a Sanhedrin. We are not allowed to base ourselves on such fanciful thinking. This suggestion of the Rambam is correct. It is based on solid sources and correct Torah thinking. It was accepted by the leading Chachamim of Eretz Yisrael, including Rabbi Yosef Karo, the author of the Shulchan Aruch here in Eretz Yisrael 500 years ago. And it actually got off the ground and was an accepted reality. Unfortunately, the fact that the number of Jews in the country from that time onwards began to dwindle for historical and political reasons, and this fact led to the unraveling of the entire endeavor. This is in no way a reflection on the halachic legitimacy of what was done at that time. Quite the reverse. We are to learn from this, that if this idea was accepted by all those great Chachamim at that time, and there was in fact a very large concentration of great Chachamim in Eretz Yisrael at that time, 500 odd years ago, this proves that this is an acceptable and correct procedure, and there is in fact no other procedure, and therefore this is also what must be and can be done today. The issue that we must address ourselves to is the following: how are we to convince people of the seriousness of such an endeavor? And my answer to that briefly is as follows. When dealing with an endeavor such as this, which is obviously radical and in the eyes of some people, because they're not familiar with it, a very newfangled idea in the realm of Torah Judaism, in order to convince people of the legitimacy and the seriousness of this endeavor and the people associated with it, one has to act in a serious and calculated manner, not by looking to make headlines, to be sensational, and therefore to choose to deal with the most unlikely and irrelevant issues, but quite the reverse, to deal with issues that do affect people's lives, that have relevance to the average Jew, not necessarily to start with big issues like the Mikdash, which is a very real issue, but it doesn't have to be the first item on the agenda of such a Sanhedrin, but dafka dealing with issues, specifically dealing with issues which affect the lives of Jews and affect the way people perceive the Torah. I, for example, can see almost no better way of proving the seriousness and the correctness and the legitimacy of such a body than by dealing with an issue, for example, such as the question of the kazait, the size of the kazait, the volume of an olive, which of course sounds like something very mundane, which it is, and also very straightforward if one is of a rational turn of mind, which is also true. It is a very simple and rational thing. And yet we know that in the world of halachic discourse today, the concept of the kazait has been so misconstrued and is so misunderstood that it has become a watchword for the irrationality and one of the issues that indicates the problematic nature of what has happened to halakha over many generations. And this perception of Torah and this execution, this practice, this implementation of Torah in the real world has to be set right. And when people see that there are people willing to deal with such issues and give a firm psak halakha on the matter without being concerned that they are breaking new ground in the eyes of many and not following the accepted way of thinking on this matter, when people see that such a body deals with such an issue in a respectable, serious manner and produces written materials on such a matter which show that they know exactly what they are saying and why they are saying it, and if they do this again and again on a number of subjects, people will begin to realize over time that there is something new and important and significant happening in the Torah world. This is the only way to go about such an endeavor, and this is something that is most certainly doable, and in fact it is incumbent upon us to move such a project forward.
Thank you, Rabbi Bar-Hayim. We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. We would also like to suggest the following opportunity to our viewers. If you identify with Rabbi Bar-Hayim's message and would like to sponsor or dedicate a video interview with the rabbi in honor or memory of a loved one, if you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement. Please email us at office@machonshilo.org.